If you've ever lain awake calculating how much more you'd need to finally feel safe, this story is for you. There's a reason the number in your account never quite settles the fear in your chest, and it has nothing to do with the number. Today, I want to tell you about a king who had everything a kingdom could offer, and who one night asked a barefoot monk a single question. The monk's answer took only 7 words. Those 7 words ended a war the king had been fighting inside himself for 30 years. But we'll get to them. First, you need to understand what kind of man asks a question like that in the middle of the night, dressed as a beggar, alone. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, if you could ask one honest question about money and know you'd get a true answer, what would you ask? You might be surprised how many people are carrying the exact same question, unspoken, for years. There was once a kingdom in the hill country, ringed by pine forests and cut through by a slow green river, ruled by a man named Varnas. He had inherited the throne young, at 22, when his father died of a fever that took 3 villages with him. In the 30 years since, Varnas had done what he believed a good king should do. He expanded the granaries. He paved the roads between the market towns. He built a wall of pale stone around the capital that could be seen shining at sunset from 2 days' ride away. Under his rule, the treasury grew so large that a new vault had to be dug beneath the palace, its ceiling reinforced with cedar beams thick as a man's waist. And yet Varnas did not sleep, not in the ordinary sense. He slept the way a soldier sleeps in enemy country, in pieces, with one ear open, waking at the smallest sound to run the numbers again. How much grain was stored against drought? How many soldiers could be armed if the northern lords broke their oath? How much gold would be needed if the river flooded and the eastern fields drowned? He had a mind built for arithmetic, and he had turned that mind loose on his own life until it never stopped calculating, not even in his dreams. He was not a cruel king. He was, in fact, deeply loved. He lowered taxes twice during his reign and forgave the debts of an entire province after a bad harvest. Crowds gathered at the palace gates on feast days just to catch sight of him, and children were named after him in 3 of the market towns. By every visible measure, Varnas had built a life of astonishing abundance, the kind other rulers wrote letters asking him to explain. But those who served closest to him, his physician, his old steward, the woman who had nursed him as a child and still lived in the palace kitchens, noticed something the crowds never saw. The king flinched when merchants spoke of foreign wealth. He grew quiet and strange whenever a neighboring ruler's fortune was mentioned at the dinner table. He kept, in a locked drawer beside his bed, a ledger that no minister was permitted to see, where he tallied not the kingdom's wealth but his own, down to the last coin, updating it by candlelight when he could not sleep. His physician once found him at dawn still seated at his writing table. The candle burned down to a puddle of wax, the ledger opened to a column of numbers that had not changed since midnight. When asked what he was doing, the king only said he was checking, though there was nothing left to check that he had not already checked twice. His weakness, if you want to call it that, was the same weakness so many of us carry without ever naming it. He believed that somewhere ahead of him, at some future total he had not yet reached, the fear would finally stop. He believed safety was a number. He had simply never found the number yet. One autumn, a monk named Kavi passed through the capital. He owned nothing but a robe the color of dried clay, a wooden bowl, and a walking staff worn smooth by decades of roads. He had no temple, no fixed home, no coin. He begged for his single daily meal and slept wherever the evening found him, sometimes in a farmer's barn, sometimes under the open sky. People said strange things about him, that he had once been offered a position advising a wealthy court and had walked away from it without a word of explanation, that he laughed more than any man they had ever met, though he possessed almost nothing. Word of the monk reached the palace through the kitchen woman who had given him a bowl of rice at the back gate and come away unsettled by the calm in his eyes. But what the king didn't know was that he was already looking for this man, in the way you look for something you cannot name. He had been looking for years. That night, Varnas did something he had never done. He took off his robes of state, put on a plain traveler's cloak, and walked out through the servants' gate alone, without guards, without torches, following the rumor of a beggar monk sleeping somewhere near the river. He found Kavi sitting cross-legged on the riverbank, a small fire burning low beside him, his wooden bowl empty at his knee. The king sat down across the fire, uninvited, and for a long while, neither man spoke. The river moved past them in the dark, indifferent and endless, the way rivers are. Remember the empty bowl. It matters later. You have nothing, the king finally said. It was not quite a question. The monk looked at him, at the fine cloak trying to hide a king, at the hands too soft to have done real labor, at the eyes of a man who had not slept properly in decades. And he smiled, but not unkindly. I have exactly what I need, Kavi said, which is very different from nothing. This is where everything changed, though neither man knew it yet. Varnus felt something in his chest tighten, the way it did when a minister brought him bad harvest numbers. He had ruled a kingdom for 30 years. He had never once heard a man say, without apology or performance, that he had enough. I have a vault beneath my palace, the king said, and his voice cracked slightly, surprising him. Cedar beams, iron doors, more gold than 10 generations could spend, and I have not slept a full night since I was young. I know, said the monk simply. How could you possibly know that? Because I have met 100 men like you on the road, Kavi said. Merchants who counted their coins twice a day and still felt poor. Farmers with 3 good fields who lay awake fearing the 4th would fail. I have never met a man made peaceful by a number, only by a decision. But this is where the king made his mistake, and it is worth sitting with, because it is the mistake almost all of us make. Varnus assumed the monk was telling him to give everything away. He assumed poverty was the answer, the way a man assumes the opposite of sickness must be the cure, without asking what health actually requires. He grew almost angry there by the fire. You want me to abandon my kingdom, empty the vault, live as you do, with a bowl and a robe? And this is the detail you need to hold on to, because everything the story is really about lives inside it. Kavi shook his head slowly. I never asked you to have nothing, he said. I asked you why you believe having enough requires a number at all. The king sat with that a long time. The fire burned lower. Somewhere across the river, an owl called twice and went quiet. Then what would you have me do? Varnus finally asked, and his voice, when he asked it, sounded younger than it had in 30 years. Sounded, in fact, like the boy who had inherited a crown before he was ready for the weight of it. Kavi picked up his empty wooden bowl and turned it over in his hands, so the firelight caught the worn grain of it. Ask yourself one true question, he said. Not how much would make you safe. Ask this instead. What is the fear actually protecting? Because it is rarely the coins, my friend. It is almost never the coins. The king's mistake had always been in the counting. He had spent 30 years building a fortress out of numbers, believing that if the walls were thick enough, the fear inside them would finally go quiet. But fear built into a fortress does not disappear. It simply gets a bigger room to pace in. The 2 men sat together as the fire burned down to coals, and finally the king asked the question that had been waiting inside him since he was 22 years old, since the day they placed a crown on a grieving boy's head and told him a kingdom's safety was now entirely his to carry. Then when is it enough? He asked. Truly. Tell me plainly. When will I finally have enough? The frogs along the riverbank had gone quiet. Even the fire seemed to lean in. Kavi did not answer right away. He set down his bowl. He looked at the king, not at his robes, not at his rank, only at his face, the way you look at a man and not a title. Then he spoke. 7 words. No more. Enough was never a number, friend. That was all. He did not explain further. He did not soften it or dress it up in metaphor. He let the 7 words sit in the space between them, over the low coals, beside the dark moving water, and he let the king do with them whatever the king needed to do. Varnus did not sleep that night either, but for the first time in 30 years, it was not fear keeping him awake. It was something closer to grief, and underneath the grief, something that felt almost like relief. That merchant counting coins by candlelight is you, every time you refresh a banking app hoping the number will finally say you're safe. That king behind stone walls is you, every time you tell yourself that once you hit a certain amount, once the account reaches a certain line, the tightness in your chest will finally loosen. It is a story we tell ourselves so often we stop noticing we're telling it. Here is the truth Kavi was pointing to. the one philosophical thread this whole story is really about. Sufficiency is not a threshold you cross. It is not a number waiting somewhere ahead of you, reachable if you just work a little longer, save a little harder, earn a little more. Sufficiency is a decision you make in the present, with whatever is actually in front of you right now. And if you have not learned to make that decision at the number you have today, you will not magically learn to make it at a bigger number tomorrow. The fear does not shrink as the account grows. It simply moves into a larger room and paces there instead, the way it paced through the king's cedar-beamed vault. This is not a story about giving everything away, and it was never meant to be. Kavi never asked the king to empty his treasury. He asked him to stop expecting a number to do a decision's job. You are allowed to build. You are allowed to save, to plan, to want more for the people you love. What the story asks is smaller and harder than poverty. It asks you to stop postponing peace until some future total arrives, because that total, once you reach it, will simply reveal a new one standing behind it, the way every hill in that kingdom revealed another hill beyond it. So what do you actually do with this tonight, in your own life, with your own number, whatever it happens to be? First, tonight, before you sleep, write down 3 things money cannot buy that you already own. Not things you wish you had, things you already hold. A friendship, a working pair of hands, a mind that still asks honest questions. This is not a gratitude exercise for its own sake. It is training your attention to notice sufficiency that already exists, instead of only scanning for what's missing. Second, name the actual fear underneath the number. The next time you feel that familiar tightness about money, don't just soothe it with a bigger goal. Ask Kavi's question instead. What is this fear actually protecting? Sometimes it is safety. Sometimes it is the fear of being seen as less than someone else. Sometimes it is an old memory of not having enough, still running the numbers long after the danger has passed. You cannot make peace with a fear you have never named honestly. Third, choose one number. Modest, specific, something well within reach this month. And practice calling it enough, out loud, even if only to yourself. Not because it is the most you could earn or save, but as practice for the decision itself. Sufficiency is a muscle. Like any muscle, it strengthens with small, repeated use, not with one dramatic vow made in a moment of exhaustion. You will likely notice resistance the first time you try this. A voice will remind you of everything still unfinished, every bill still owed, every future you haven't yet secured. That voice is not wrong to exist. It has probably kept you careful and responsible for years, but it does not get to be the only voice in the room. Let it speak, and then gently let the decision stand anyway. This is not denial. It is simply refusing to let a single anxious voice run the household of your mind unchallenged, the way the king finally refused to let his ledger run his nights. Picture the king years later, an old man now, sitting on that same riverbank in the evening light, the palace walls glowing pale gold behind him in the distance. He still ruled, he still kept a treasury, but the locked drawer beside his bed sat empty, the secret ledger long since burned. He came to that river often, not to escape his kingdom, but to remember on quiet evenings what enough had come to mean for him. And somewhere on a road you will never see, an old monk with a worn wooden bowl was probably still walking, still owning almost nothing, still laughing more than most men with everything. Enough was never a number. It was a decision the king finally learned to make on an ordinary night, beside an ordinary fire, with a bowl older than his crown. And it is a decision waiting for you too, tonight, at whatever number happens to be sitting in your account right now. If this story gave you even one quiet moment tonight, there are more waiting for you here. Next time, I'll tell you about a woman who spent 40 years chasing a fortune only to discover in the end exactly what her fear had been protecting all along. Walk gently, hold loosely,